Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Steven's going to be teaching you a beautiful classical piece, which is actually part of our brand new course, which is called Classical Technique and Style. Now this course sets out to teach you the two main picking techniques that classical ukulele players use. Let's take a look at what they are. The first picking technique is arpeggiando. This is also known as the rest stroke. This technique involves your picking finger pushing through the string that you're playing and coming to rest on the adjacent string. Now, this technique does have its limitations because as you come to rest on the adjacent string, it's going to mute it. So this technique is mainly used for playing single note melody lines. The second technique is known as tirando, which is also called the free stroke. This one involves the finger picking the string and then moving into the space underneath the hand after each note. So you're not resting on an adjacent string, which means that every note has the ability to ring out and sustain. However, this technique makes it more difficult to produce the loud, full-sounding tone and characteristic of the arpeggiando technique. So this song is finger-picked using tirando technique, which, as we have just learned, is the go-to technique if we want our strings, aka our notes, to ring out and sustain. So if you think back to the performance, you're literally just playing arpeggios. You're playing one chord to the next, and so forth. And as you heard the music being played, you heard a beautiful sustain throughout. You heard every single note just ring out crystal clear and flow effortlessly into the next. And we achieved that sound by using tirando picking technique. Now, if you'd like to dive deeper into how to do tirando or arpeggiando technique, I'd highly encourage you to jump into our course, which you can do so by clicking this link or the link in the description box below. Now, this course, it's going to teach you the mechanics behind performing each of these picking techniques, and it's going to give you a ton of exercises that you can practice them with. So those exercises really help to get them ingrained into your playing skills. Now, let's talk a little bit about this song. So in this video, Steven's going to be teaching you how to play the entire arrangement. But if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for this song. Now, also on that page will be the interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now, this is a really cool feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you want. Just a great asset in learning this song that much easier. Now, before I hand it off to Steven to teach you how to play this tune, there's a couple things that I want to mention real quick. This lesson is part of the course, so he's going to be teaching it with the assumption that you've gone through the course and you've made it up to this lesson in the course. So he may reference some things that were taught previously in the course, and he's also going to be teaching you how to play it with the assumption that you are familiar with the picking technique. Now, the second thing I want to mention is that this song is best played with a low G ukulele. So you get the best sound using a low G ukulele. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Steven to teach you how to play this, and then I'll catch you at the end of the video.
In this unit, we're going to look at a more challenging exercise to practice our free stroke. We're going to learn an excerpt from Fernando Sor's Study in B minor. Fernando Sor was a prolific Spanish classical guitarist in the early Romantic era. He wrote literally hundreds of pieces for classical guitar. But this last etude from his Opus 35 is one of my absolute favourites. It's just got such a simple but beautiful melody. And although it is just a musical study, it really stands out to me as a beautiful piece of music in its own right. Now at the basic level, we're just going to use this as an exercise in free stroke and playing arpeggios. And if you're happy just to stick with that, then feel free to skip ahead and start learning this piece. But if you want to take your skills to the next level, then you could also use this as an exercise in separating the melody from the harmony. So the melody for this piece sits mostly on beats 1 and 3. If we strip out just the melody for the first 8 measures, it should sound like this. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So it really is worth playing that melody in isolation a few times, even singing it in your head just to get that melody really embedded in your brain. The challenge here is to emphasize that melodic voice while controlling and suppressing the harmonic voice. This is particularly challenging with this piece because the harmonic voice lives in a very similar range to the melody. So to achieve that separation, we need the technical ability in our picking fingers to play the melody notes with a touch more weight and then the harmony notes with a touch less weight. This level of control doesn't necessarily come instantly either, so be patient with it and don't be afraid to put the practice in. Also keep in mind that the way we're going to highlight the melody is by playing the accompaniment more softly rather than playing the melody notes too loud and forcing them and picking them too hard. Okay, so in addition to the right hand challenge, this is also a pretty challenging piece for the left hand. There are some quite tricky chord changes that can interrupt the flow of this delicate melody. But if you stick to the left hand fingerings I'm going to show you in this video, I'm sure you'll be able to master this beautiful piece. Okay, so make sure you've got your low G ukulele and let's get into it. So this piece is in 3/4 time, so we have 3 quarter notes to the bar, and we're mostly just playing this continuous 8th note rhythm throughout. So for each measure, we're just playing the rhythm 1 and 2 and 3 and. And although it's called Study in B minor, we're actually in the key of E minor when we play it on ukulele. So measures 1 and 2, I'll play those through so you can see how they sound. Okay, so we're going to start in measure 1 on this E minor chord, but we don't need the first finger for now. So when we start the piece, I probably wouldn't have that on, just have the second finger on the E string of the 3rd, pinky on the C string of the 4th, and then 3rd finger on the G string, the 4th. In terms of the right hand for these first 2 measures, we can just apply our kind of standard Pima system here. So the first note on the E string will be played with the middle finger. That one's melody. So pick that with a touch more weight. Then the next 3 notes that we're going to pick, just notes of this chord, will play a little bit softer. So the index finger on the C string, a bit softer, thumb, softer, back to the index, nice and soft. But when we get to this E string, once again at the 3rd fret, that's melody, that's beat 3. So that middle finger again picks that with a touch more weight before the index finger finishes off that measure with a soft pick of that C string. So just that measure, measure 1. You can hear those 2 melody notes on beats 1 and 3, just that little bit more prominent. So then into measure 2, we need the A string at the 2nd fret now. So the first finger will go on to complete that E minor chord, and then beat 1 is that A string at the 2nd. This is melody. So the ring finger now will pick that with a touch more weight, so it's prominent. That's our melody note. Then the next 3 notes a little bit softer. E string, G string, E string. Then back to that A string melody because it's beat 3, so a little bit harder with the ring finger, and then back to a nice soft pick of the E string. Okay, so once again, those 2 measures. Nice. So let's try playing those 2 measures through together now. 2 and 3 and. on to measures 3 and 4 now. They should sound like this. Okay, so measure 3, we're starting on this B7 chord, but if we think about where we were at the end of measure 2, we were holding this E minor chord. So the first note for measure 3 is the open A, so leave everything else on for now, but just take the first finger off to open up that A string, and then play that with the ring finger, and emphasize that note because that's melody, that's B1. Then the next note, we want the E string at the 2nd fret, so I would use the first finger that we've just taken off the A string, to then play the E string at the 2nd, take the 2nd finger off. I'd probably leave these two on, they can just stay on there for now because we're going to come back to them shortly and they won't interfere with this measure. So the and after beat 1, we play that E string at the 2nd, nice and soft, then the G string at the 4th, we're holding that there already, then back to the E string, nice and soft, then hit that A string open again with the ring finger, with a touch more weight because that's melody, and then back to the E string, but we're not going to play this with the middle finger. This is going to be our first example of right hand alternation because the first note of measure 4 is also the E string, so we have 2 successive E string notes here. So the last note of measure 3, we'll play that with the index finger, so it's still just this E string at the 2nd, we're already holding it there, so pick that with the index finger, and then put the 2nd finger back onto the E string at the 3rd fret, and then pick that with the middle finger. So there's 2 notes there, E string 2nd up to E string 3rd, index finger first, then middle finger. Okay, and then once we've done that, we're then holding this E minor chord again, but without the first finger because we don't need it. So that first note we've played, E string at the 3rd, that was beat 1 of measure 4, touch more weight because that's melody. Then the next 3 notes, C string, G string, back to C string, nice and soft because they're accompaniment, and then hit that E string at the 3rd again with a touch more weight with the middle finger because that one's melody, and then back to the C string with the index, but nice and soft. Okay, so once again, those 2 measures. Okay, so let's have a go at playing those 2 measures through together now. 2 and 3 and. So on to measures 5 and 6 now, they should sound like this. Okay, so we're starting on this B chord now on the start of measure 5, but again, let's look at where we were at the end of the previous measure, measure 4. We were holding this E minor chord without the first finger on the A string. So this B chord, what we're going to do is drop the E string down to the 2nd fret. So the first finger will take that E string at the 2nd, 2nd finger comes off, and then we're also going to need to drop the C string down to the 3rd fret. So the pinky will come off and the 2nd finger will take that C string at the 3rd, but the 3rd finger can just stay on that G string. It's been on there the whole time since we started this piece, it's still on there, we'll just leave it on there for this measure as well. So now we're holding this B chord and we'll hit beat 1 with a touch more weight with the middle finger. Then the next 3 notes, C string, G string, back to C string, nice and soft, then hit the E string again, emphasize that, then back to the C string, nice and soft. Okay, so now we're going to come back to this E minor chord in measure 6, but we're going to finger it a little bit differently so that we don't lose the kind of ringing of the notes from this B chord. So the pinky will go on to the, well actually we'll leave the pinky for now, we'll just do the first note. So once we've played the B, yeah, the first note we need is just the E string at the 3rd fret. So what we'll do here is just use that first finger and just take the pressure off, move it up. It's a bit of a squeeze with that 2nd finger on there, on the C string there, but it's the best way to do it to keep everything ringing. So just slide that first finger up and then pick that E string at the 3rd on beat 1. Now we need the C string at the 4th, so the pinky we'll take that, and then the second finger can come off as we do that to make a bit more space for this kind of awkward chord here. So then C string fourth, a little bit softer, G string fourth, a little bit softer, back to the C string, nice and soft, and then the E string at the third, a little bit more weight to that one, because that's melody, then C string, nice and soft to finish off. So those two measures once again. Brilliant. So let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 2 and 3 and. On to measures 7 and 8 now, they should sound like this. Okay, so measure 7 is this A minor chord, which is just all open strings to begin with. So at the end of measure 6, we can just take all the fingers off, and then measure 7, we play the open A with a touch more weight, because that's melody, then open E, open C, back to the open E, a little bit softer for those 3 notes. Now we want that A string at the first fret, and we're going to play it with a bit more weight because it's melody, but we'll use the second finger to play that because we want to keep this first finger free and ready for the next measure. So pick that with the ring finger on beat 3, then the and after beat 3, just hit that open E a little bit softer. Then if we take that straight into measure 8, we're building up this different version of a B chord, and then we're going to use the first finger to bar across the second fret, but just the first 2 strings. So the A string and the E string, a little half bar there with the first finger, and then pick that note on beat 1. Again, melody, so a touch more weight to that note, and then the E string at the second, a little bit softer. Now we want to add the second finger. No, we use the third finger for this, and we'll see why. Again, this is a little bit awkward, but it just helps with the transition to the next measure. So the C string at the 3rd fret on beat 2 we'll play with the 3rd finger, but again, that's harmony, so keep that soft. And then back to the E string at the 2nd, and then we'll use the 4th finger, the pinky, to play the G string at the 4th fret on beat 3, and then C string at the 3rd to finish off. Okay, so that's kind of the end of that section there. So there's no second melody note in there. So beat 3 of that measure 8 isn't melody. We just have that melody note on beat 1. Then the rest of this is just accompaniment just to finish off that measure. Okay, so a little bit of an awkward chord to hold there, but when we go into measure 9, we'll see why we're doing it that way. But for now, let's have a go at playing measure 7 and 8 through together. 2 and 3 and. So measures 9, 10, 11 and 12 are just the same as measures 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we won't go over those again, but we will just look at the start of measure 9 just to look at how we transition from that freaky B chord into that E minor once again. So the end of measure 8, we're holding this B chord in a slightly awkward way, but the reason we've done that is because the first note we want in measure 9 is the E string at the 3rd fret. So by doing it this way, it keeps that second finger free, so it can fret that note on beat 1 without cutting the other notes that are ringing too short. So at the end of measure 8, we're holding this into measure 9, put the 3rd finger on. As you pick that E string at the 3rd, you can take these 2 fingers off and lift that bar off, and then as you're playing that note, bring these round so that they complete that E minor chord again, with the pinky on the C string at the 4th, and then the 3rd finger on the G string at the 4th. And then they're ready to carry on playing that measure again. So that takes us up to measure 13. So measures 13 and 14 now should sound like this. Okay, so measure 13 is this D7 chord, and then at the end of measure 12, we would have been holding the E minor chord like this, but that can all come off at the end of measure 12. When we play measure 13, we just want this open A string melody note, so pick it with a touch more weight with that ring finger. Then we're going to go to the E string at the 2nd fret, which we'll pick with the middle finger, but just softly because it's harmony. So we'll use the 1st finger to take E string at the 2nd, then open C, back to that E string, and then A string open. Emphasize that because that's melody. And then the last note of measure 13 is this E string at the 2nd once again, but we're going to use the index finger to pick it because we've got 2 successive E string notes here, so we'll do our right hand alternation. So the last note of measure 13, play with the index finger, then the 1st note of measure 14, add the 2nd finger on there to take it up to the 3rd fret, and then pick it with the middle finger. Okay, and then we're going to finish off this measure 14. We've seen this before, it's just this E minor chord. So the pinky will take the C string at the 4th, 3rd finger will then go on to the G string at the 4th, back to the C string, hit that E string at the 3rd with a touch more weight, and then C string. So once again, those 2 measures together. So let's have a go at playing those 2 measures through together now. 2 and 3 and. So on to the final 2 measures now, measures 15 and 16. They should sound like this. Okay, so measure 15 is familiar, we've seen that before, it's just this B chord. This is the same as measure 5 with these 2 melody hits on the E string at the 2nd fret. And then into measure 16, we're going to build up this E minor chord once again. So the 1st note of measure 16 actually isn't melody this time. So the pinky is going to go on to that C string at the 4th, but we're going to pick that a little bit quieter with the index finger. As we do that, the 1st finger can come off, the 2nd finger will jump over to the E string at the 3rd fret, and then the and after beat 1, that E string at the 3rd will play a little bit louder because that's the melody to finish off this piece. Then we play G string at the 4th, nice and soft, C string at the 4th, nice and soft, and we're slowing things down as we go through this measure, and then we finish off with this higher voicing of an E minor chord where we'll bar the 7th fret and use the 3rd finger to play the G string at the 9th fret. And just finish off with that nice full hit of that chord. So once again, those 2 measures, measures 15 and 16. So let's try playing those 2 measures through together now. 2 and 3 and. So that's the end of that unit, and in fact the end of that entire module on the 2 different picking techniques for classical ukulele. If you're hungry for more, come and join me over in module 3, where we'll look at a couple of advanced performance techniques that can really take your playing to the next level.
I guess so. This week's lesson was a ton of fun, a very beautiful song, and I do want to give you a friendly reminder that if you want to go a step further in your classical ukulele education, do check out our brand new course, Classical Technique and Style. I'm going to link it in the description box below, but you can also go to our site, rockclass101.com, and do a search for Classical Technique and Style. Now, this course, it not only teaches you the 2 picking techniques we talked about in the beginning of the video, but it also teaches you stylistic approaches. So how to play with more dynamics, how to add rubato to your playing, how to change the position of your picking hand to get different tones when you're finger picking out of the ukulele. It really goes in depth and teaches you how to perform classical music with more authenticity. Now, I also want to give you a friendly reminder for the lesson that you just learned. If you want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for this song. And don't forget too, on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can literally hit play, watch the tabs scroll across in real time, highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed learning this tune and hope you check out the course, and we'll catch you in the next lesson. Take care.